from AI to cultural institutions, from critical code to collective care. This conference seeks to remind us that education is also a site of action. The conference has been developed within the framework of the EU-funded project Critical ChangeLab. And to give a short introduction to the project, I'm joined by Eva Durall Gazulla, postdoctoral researcher at the University of Oulu and co-lead of the Critical ChangeLab project. Eva's work explores participatory and creative approaches at the intersection of democracy and digital technology. She has collaborated widely on projects that reimagine learning as civic and cultural practice. So I'll now hand it over to Eva to give a short introduction to the Critical ChangeLab project that this conference is presented within.
Thank you. Well, hello everyone. Here I just want to give a very short introduction about to give you some context about the Critical ChangeLab project that Andrew was introducing. I would say for the project it's a Horizon Europe, and it responds to a call of education for democracy. One of the things that I would say that are the starting points of the project, and I think that there are many projects that are or initiatives that are here that are connecting with that, is the feeling that of Western democracy, liberal democracy is under crisis. And there are many reasons for that, but the one that we were taking as a starting point of the project was the notion that it's this type of, or this form of democracy is based on many exclusions. And among the many exclusions that we can observe, we were tackling into the position that young people and children have in this kind of approach to democracy. If we understand it from a very formal perspective, they don't have the right to vote. There are many decisions that are taking about their lives, but still we can see that young people and children, they know what is important for them. They have a lot of expertise about their own lives. There are many things, they have a lot of knowledge, many aspects that we will say that they have agency, even though their rights are not recognized as a citizen who can vote. So this was the starting point of the project. And I would say that here we take the notion of democracy as everyday relations. How we relate to each other, how we make our voice being heard, how we negotiate. So that was the small kind of democracy that is in the everyday, what we were taking as a starting point in the project. And to work about that, this is something also that I can see a lot of connections with what we can see around. We were building or using creative practices, art and creative practices to cultivate this type of a small kind of everyday democracy. That it's basically what I would say we need to look at if we want to kind of question or tackle what are the crises that we are facing. So in the project, I would say we were developing a model of a democratic pedagogy. Here, I would say, basically we were building on participatory approaches to democracy, participatory action research, and as part of the project, we have been running critical change labs. I would say that each critical change lab could be taking a small kind of participatory action research project, an experiment, spaces that bring opportunities for young people to rethink their role in society, to give them voice, and also to see that they have they are able to make changes. They have the possibility to kind of exercise some agency in society. So of course there is a lot of things, I would say many challenges. I'm not going to say that everything went perfect and smooth, but I think that this critical change lab where they do create a space where young people could change their role. And in many cases here, I can see that there is a connection with this session in the sense that in many aspects, changing their role meant getting visible, becoming more acting in society, engaging in these activist roles. So we think that these type of approaches are something that is it's not the only one, but I think that we need to join forces to kind of cultivate the spaces that go in that direction. And also to close and connect with the topic of the festival regarding the notion of panic. Well, I think that it's panic to me, when I think about that, it means low agency. You panic when you see that you don't have anything to do, when you don't have the possibility to escape. But in the critical change labs that we were running with young people, and we run quite many, almost engaging 2,000 participants, I don't think that young people are in the state of panic. They have other emotions. They have anger, they have frustration, they want to do things, they want agency, but they are not in panic. And I will say that that's a good sign, but we need to kind of open more spaces so they don't end in this panic. And thank you, Andrew. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Eva, for that short introduction. And if you want to learn more about the project, you can visit the website. But we'll now move on to our opening keynote. Educating Agency in the Age of AI. This keynote is a two-part exploration that brings together visionary cultural analysis and critical feminist insights. To begin this double keynote is Derek de Kerkhove, whose work spans media theory, technology, and society, from his leadership at the McLuhan program to his latest books on quantum ecology. He argues the digital transformation is challenging our foundational capacities for language, reason, and democratic agency. Following him is Katarina Mozona, a political scientist whose intersectional feminist lens sheds light on algorithmic bias, digital violence, and the pressing need to design education that empowers critical agency in young people facing AI-mediated misinformation and platform control. So I now give the stage to Derek for the first part of this two-part keynote.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation, and thank you also for the opportunity of turning back to Bow City and to Linz after 7 years. I've been here many times, but since COVID, none at all, and so I'm very happy to be back. I thought that I should probably give you an idea of what I'm going to talk about by going through my basic argument, because I am dealing with the long range of the situation we're in today. First, we're talking about the West. The West is in trouble. Democracy is in trouble. And geopolitically, there are reasons to panic, I suppose. The West actually was invented a little bit over 2,000 years ago by a bunch of Greek writers, scribes. And it is today trapped between two cultural operating systems. You know what an operating system is. It is the software that runs all the applications. And literacy, phonological literacy, the Greek invention, has been the operating system of our alphabetic past. And we're still into the alphabetic past, but it's now being challenged by the digital transformation, which I will from now on call the digital transition, because it's not an end in itself. The digital is going somewhere else. And so this connection between, or this encounter between the alphabetic culture and the digital culture is not as smooth or as easy as it might appear. And it is now creating what is, I call anyway, an epistemological crisis. An epistemological crisis is a crisis of meaning, a crisis of the production of meaning, of interpreting meaning. But the effect of the digital transition is to take over reasoning itself after having taken memory, judgment, and even spatial orientation. You now depend on your navigator to just imagine space. Actually, we don't imagine space, we just followed instructions. So that our main cognitive faculties have been taken over by digital transition. And it also has been reducing our internal defenses. I'll explain what that means. AI, machine language, large language models, and navigators do a better job, at least in the fields that they are covering. So then what we must do, because all these functions are externalized in devices, instead of training ourselves, as I was educated years ago to do, we now have to train our machines. And I'll be talking about how we do that. Now, this way we can, if we can manage to train our machines to our satisfaction, we may recover some of the identity, some of the sense of autonomy, of subjecthood that we are losing now to the digital transition. We can maybe recover autonomy to a certain extent, but we will not recover our interiority. Why am I speaking about interiority? Because interiority is what learning to read and write has created inside our minds. We have internal space from which we make decisions and make reflections and so on. So we are losing that. We're losing that because we don't read anymore. Losing interiority is losing defense against any kind of influence coming from outside. We will need a new social contract, and we'll be working on that. And I can see that there's a lot of things in the exhibits that I've seen today where there is serious thinking in an entirely new direction. Transition to what? Transition from the alphabetic through the digital to quantum physics, to the quantum era. 40 years ago, just about when all of the digital transition was starting, I could see it coming. I could see it coming little by little with first very, very humble devices, 64K in my first computer, and gradually going faster and faster and taking over where we are now. I can tell you, and I'm sure you must agree with me with that, we are seeing the same thing happening with quantum physics and quantum computing. But what is happening with quantum physics is that it changes. Once you understand what it is consisting of, it is changing our relationship with ourselves, others, and with the Earth, with the planet Earth. And since we talk about critical change, yes, that is the critical change. We are going to move from a situation where literacy, alphabetic literacy, separated us from the world and from each other, into a situation where the contrary is going to happen, and we come together again. But before we get there, we have to get out fast of our Anthropocene fixation. We talk about the Anthropocene as if it was the end of the game. It isn't. It's the end of our game, because now we have to share that game with all the other factors of planet Earth. So now for some details. You can stop me whenever we get to the 15 minutes, and then we'll simply, I will finish during the conversation. I think it would be the best. So, as I said, subjecthood and democracy both depend on alphabetic literacy. Learning to read the transcription of words into not images but sounds is actually create a situation where you can just read without knowing the context. As long as you know the language, you get it. But you can even read if you don't know the language, which means that you can read without any context at all. It's the only system existing today that allows you to do that. The issue of context is fundamental to understand what's happening with our culture today. If you're Chinese and you read Chinese, you absolutely cannot read without knowing the context, what it is that you are reading. If you're Hebrew or if you are Arabic, you have to know the context to know where to put the syllables, the vowel sounds. You always need the context first. In our culture, no. In the Western culture, you don't need the context first. It comes, it has to. You can't live without context. But you can just find out stuff by reading, knowing the language, and that's it. Putting the context first is an entirely different relationship with the world than putting the text first. And it also creates that distancing effect between the objective and the subjective. Suddenly, things that are written down have the appearance of being objective. They are object for you to look at. The whole world becomes an object for you to look at. And it becomes something to analyze, something that will be given to science, something will be given to learning. And what's happening to you, the interpreter, your job is to be the subject. You're the subject of an experience of the relationship between you and the world. That's a distancing effect. So it's very important to understand that the distancing gap between the evidence and the opinion, the subjectivity and objectivity, is being established by learning to read and write. That situation has made us not just the occupant, the owner of the world. We have owned it by exploiting it, studying it, analyzing it. Is that it?
2 minutes.
I've no more than 2 minutes? Oh dear, this is a lot faster. Okay, well, then I'll rush through it, but I'm going to give you the rest in 2 minutes. What's important about the digital transition, it has externalized our relationship to what we used to contain inside ourselves. By learning to read and write, we have turned our mind as a laboratory of life, of experience, of thinking. Once we ask our machines to reason for ourselves, we are externalizing that relationship. And this relationship, this externalizing relationship, actually reduces our interiority, reduces the immediate connection we have with our thinking, with our learning, with our voting. The less interiority we have, the greater risk is democracy in. So this externalization is an important issue that we have to take care of. Let's talk about the topic for which we were invited. How do you handle the externalization of your reasoning system? There are two big contexts here too. You may know about the fact that the large language models are rushing to increase the quantity of data they can use and process. But one thing you need to know about large language models, they need what's called a context window. The context window of a large language model, the bigger it is, the longer you can sustain it, the better answers and the more precise answers it can give to your question, your prompting. But there's a second context window. You, your information, your personality. That's called a small language model. And it's being developed right now in all kinds of ways. Take Notebook LM, or take, I invented my own a year ago. It was called Derrick Artificial Intelligence. It worked very well. Now you don't even have to do that anymore, because the more you talk to Anthropic's Claude or to OpenAI's with the latest version, the more it knows you, just the way that Google knows more about you the more question, or used to know more about you the more question you ask. Basically, the machine learns about you. And the more it learns about you, the more your context window becomes a frame, a mask, a filter to guide the large language model. So that gives you a tremendous grasp and handle on how to relate to all this externalized thinking that is going on. It gives you back autonomy. It gives you back a certain autonomy. The only problem being that it doesn't give you back interiority. Your interiority is fundamental. Fundamental to be a private subject. Fundamental to be a voting subject. You need to have this thinking pattern going on within you and not have to trust a machine in order to be ready for any kind of situation that's political. So it's very keen, very important to consider to maintain some kind of interiority. The more we give it away to the machine. So what is happening today is because of the lack of internal reference system for making choices, many people have lost the capacity to be able to judge, and so they flock to right-wing madness. Right-wing, of which the best example are Musk and Trump. Right-wing is an over-bloated subjecthood without an interiority. So the one thing that the Greek invention has given us, which is to be subjects, individual, very strongly individual, that one thing is being removed by digital transition, but the individualization that it gives you, that's increased because of the possibility of having your opinion, sharing your opinion, creating a whole kind of new way of sort of relating in an echo chamber. Right wing is excess of ego with nothing to support it within. So we have a real problem there. Should we panic? I'm concluding. Should we panic about this? Not yet. My feeling is that the transition is from the digital culture to the quantum era, to the quantum sensibility. And what that means is that instead of being an end in itself, the digital transition is the system that translates everything into data that will eventually be able to be treated in real time by quantum computing, which is galloping ahead in a completely new relationship. But even quantum computing and being a synthesis of all the data in real time of the planet is not the real change. The real change is how people will finally recognize that they make a unity with the planet, not something that is separate, not something that occupies, not something that owns. So the critical change that we are expecting will happen, I think, within the next 10, 15 years. Even that, I'm not sure, is not too long to predict. Thank you.
Katrina Mosina to follow now with her short keynote.
Here you can. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks so much for inviting me. It's a huge pleasure. I'll have to does it fit now? Microphone? All right. It's a huge pleasure to have the second part of the keynote, and thanks so much to Derek for all those brilliant ideas and thoughts about how technologies shape the future. And as Derek already mentioned, there is loads of challenges arising with the increasing prevalence of also AI, artificial intelligence, in everyday life. I really like your example of the mind as laboratory of life, which is kind of externalized when AI comes in, and I find that pretty interesting. For now, I will try to look at educational agency in the age of AI from an intersectional feminist lens. And by educational agency, I mean the capacity of children, young people, but also grown-ups to critically learn, to act, to also shape their environments in meaningful ways. And we all know that, currently living in a moment where AI is no longer an abstract technology in research labs. It structures our everyday lives, our information ecosystem, our workplaces, our schools, even our intimate relationships. From TikTok feeds to ChatGPT homework support, AI is already part of the conditions under which young people and also elderly people learn. And indeed, there is a bunch of possibilities and chances, but there are also major dangers. So for me, the crucial question is, do we educate the next generation to merely consume AI, or do we empower them to question, resist, and shape it? And I'm not the first one to think about that. There is a whole lot of regulation all around the topic of AI. The European Union, the UN, all of those organizations have been thinking about the topic for quite long. And I brought this citation because this pretty much shows what sort of problems we see, also from a feminist perspective when looking at AI. So, when talking about the problems, first, of course, there is biases within AI systems. You all know that. We all know that AI actually is no technology of the future, really. It does not really predict the future. It kind of predicts the past. Because those systems are trained on historical data, which often are riddled with inequality and discrimination. And as Joseph Kranzberg in the 80s already said, technology is neither good, nor is it bad, nor is it neutral. So AI, of course, reproduces patterns of racism, sexism, ableism, and class bias that already exist in our societies. So, for example, a hiring algorithm may disadvantage women or racialize candidates. A content moderation system may silence queer voices while amplifying hate for certain reasons. And if you ask me, those are no technical or technological errors, but normative decisions of those who are writing the code. And with these reflections, of course, of power structures. So this is quite good link to my second critique, which is platform power. Because AI is not just a technical tool, it is, of course, you all know that, embedded in global infrastructure controlled by a handful, let's say a handful of powerful corporations, mainly led by white, cis male individuals in the global north, plus China. And those platforms decide which voices are amplified, which content is deemed trustworthy, and which communities remain invisible. And this, of course, affects democratic participation and educational opportunities, because access to knowledge increasingly also runs through those private infrastructures. And third, there is algorithmically amplified disinformation and deepfake. We have seen how AI-generated content fuels polarization, manipulates public opinion, and targets vulnerable groups. Deepfake porn, or to name it correctly, image-based sexualized violence targeting women and queer people is just one of the most brutal forms of these technologies. And victims describe the experience as deeply violating, saying things like, it wasn't actually my body, but it felt as if thousands had seen me naked. So this shows that AI is not just about efficiency, productivity, or neutrality. It is, of course, also about violence, about agency and dignity. Plus, generative AI models, or large language models, continuously perpetuate stereotypical representations of the world, following a colonial logic of truth, visibility, and power, and with this feeding the dominant narrative. And finally, of course, there is still the problem of digital exclusion, because many young people, especially those from marginalized backgrounds, do not have the same access to AI literacy. So without critical skills, they risk being excluded also from democratic deliberation and educational opportunities. So AI may even deepen existing social divides if we don't act. So what could educational agency look like in this context? I take inspiration from Bell Hooks, who described education as the practice of freedom. Because this is not only about learning how to code or to use AI tools effectively, efficiently, it is more about enabling learners to understand how those technologies shape society and how they themselves can resist and reshape those structures. So educational agency in the age of AI, from my perspective, should therefore mean developing technical literacy. And I also mean literacy in the word sense of literacy, because I believe that learning to understand how AI systems work is as important as to learn how to write and to read. Of course, it's also about political literacy, and it is about fostering creativity and resilience, but also critical questioning of who builds AI, with which data, and for what benefits. In the end, it's absolutely about creating spaces where young people do not just adapt to algorithmic environments, but learn to collectively contest them. And finally, just to be clear, it is indeed about understanding how machines like large language models really work, namely those stochastic parrots like Emily Bender and Timnit Gebru called these systems already in 2021. Most of you might know that example. Parrots, because these systems repeat patterns from their training data, a bit like a parrot mimicking sounds it has heard, and stochastics, because they don't just copy exactly, they choose words based on probabilities, and with this statistical guesses about what word is likely to come next. And they create, that's what we could say, fluent nonsense. So what is important to understand is that those machines are not thinking or understanding in the way humans do. They don't find sense, they look for correlation. And they are simply producing fluent text by recombining pieces of the past. So just one tiny example. If you ask a large language model, let's say ChatGPT, Claude, who discovered America? It might answer, Christopher Columbus discovered America in 1492. Because that is what appears most often in their training data. But the system won't necessarily add that. Of course, indigenous people have lived there for thousands of years before. So the model simply parrots the dominant story because that's what is statistically most likely. And this actually shows why critical AI literacy matters that much. Because these systems sound convincing, you all know that, but they don't really know. And they often reproduce biased or incomplete narratives. So what could solutions look like? And I'm really much looking forward to the panel as well to hear what they think about that topic. For me, it's about, of course, teaching critical literacy across curricula and also at places out of school, out of university. So I think AI education cannot and should not be confined to those STEM subjects. We need, of course, interdisciplinary approaches, connecting computer sciences with ethics, philosophy, history, gender studies, social sciences, as we see at universities slowly rising those interdisciplinary approaches. And of course, students at school, students at university should learn about those biases, about colonial data practices, about the political economy, about the political economical logic of platforms and how those platforms shape our perception of AI. It is also, of course, about intersectional perspectives, because critical AI education must recognize how discrimination works differently across gender, race, sexuality, disability, and class. Because only then can we prepare young people to resist systemic oppression embedded in AI systems, and can thus contribute to future developers at university approaching AI development differently. So D'Ignazio and Klein, in their famous volume Data Feminism, ask a very important question. What if we imagined teaching data as a place to start creating the connected, the collective caring world that we want to see? Of course, it's also about participatory approaches. Education should not treat young people as passive recipients. They should co-create guidelines for AI use in schools. They should participate in debates on digital policy and even contribute to developing alternative models of technology that center fairness and justice. Plus, approaches that center a seat at the table, especially for marginalized groups. Again, it's also about strengthening democratic participation. Should leave the microphone, sorry. Participation, because AI literacy should be linked to civic education, understanding disinformation, questioning deepfakes, and practicing safe digital behavior are not only personal skills, they are essential for democracy. And with this, of course, those skills also foster self-determination and ownership. So finally, of course, education must empower young people to see themselves not just as objects of data extraction, but as subjects with rights, dignity, and the capacity to shape digital futures. So, to conclude, AI education is not just about preparing a future workforce, as we often hear. It is about protecting human dignity. It is about securing democratic participation, creating conditions for real self-determination. Because I think if we fail to critically address the power of AI, we risk producing generations who can use these tools, but who cannot challenge their logics. But if we succeed, if we embed intersectional feminist perspectives, if we embed critical literacy and democratic participation in AI education, then we can maybe strengthen educational agency as a practice of freedom, a practice of emancipation, a practice of questioning power. And now I'm very much looking forward to your questions and the panel later on. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Derek, if you'd like to join the stage also, we have 5 minutes for questions. So if there's any questions from audience, we might be able to get 1 or 2 in. So we have a roaming mic going around, if anyone has any questions. Well, I might follow up with a question about this idea of losing interiority and that being a way of losing your own defense from outside influence. I think often when we think about agency, we talk about, especially in terms of young people, their ability to have influence on the outside. And also what you were discussing, Katarina, about like the black boxes, the power structures, the systems that we don't understand, that there's often this influence coming back and forward. And I'm just wondering if you feel like there's any strategies, or if this is some sort of like, vicious cycle that spirals back into each other that we can't sort of escape out of. What would be a way to get out of that? Sorry, if we just... No, awesome.
Would you like to start? I'm afraid that the only strategy I can recommend will be extremely unpopular. Read. Read. And read again. Because reading is internalizing information. It's internalizing information, internalizing your mental processes. It requires you to be constantly alert to the context that you are actually creating by reading. And I would recommend something which is even more unpopular. Read on paper. Why read on paper? Because paper doesn't move. You are the master of what you read on paper. You are the slave of what you read on a screen. So that's my recommendation.
Even as slave, you have the possibility to go ahead and tell the system it is wrong. So that might also be a solution or something I'm talking about with pupils or youngsters I see in my workshops using Gen AI for homework whatsoever, and telling me it doesn't matter how those systems work as long as the teacher is fine with the results. And then we start about thinking about how do you prompt? What are your questions? What are the results? And could those results be different if you prompt differently? We start to use generative AI to generate text, but we always talk about criticizing the results, having a reflective kind of approach on the results. And with this, what you can create in youngsters' minds, so to say, is sort of agency and ownership. And they feel like, oh, well, I can make a difference. I can also tell the system it is wrong in telling me that Columbus or whoever developed or found America, because there were other people before. I can tell the system that there is dominant narratives and there are other narratives about history and so on. So this might help as well to have this sort of process of interiority being started, but still, of course, we always need reflection apart from the systems.
Would you like to add anything, Derek?
Yes, I'm talking to a very educated audience here, so I'm sort of giving you a counsel that you probably already apply anyway. But keep that in mind, that in Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury, people had to learn by heart the novels because they were not allowed to read. It was forbidden because they were better controlled because they wouldn't read. We're all in the situation right now of being Fahrenheit 451 characters. We all now need to be able to continue to do this and to actually continue to practice subjecthood. Subjecthood, when it has an interiority, is wonderful. When it doesn't, it's murder. Absolute murder. For me, Trump and Musk are a perfect example of the absolute overblown subjecthood with no content. They're like walking mummies. They have nothing inside. They cannot possibly relate to anything real in this world except to the enormous amount of money they're making and stealing. So I'm political. I really feel political as I say this. I think we are being absolutely screwed by these people. There's a book, speaking of reading, 2 books I recommend. One just came out by Georgios Varoufakis, a Greek, who wrote a book about the West. Read about it. It tells you everything about the West except that the Greeks, not recognize it, and they don't. I've been in Greece trying to tell Greek people how important the invention was. He doesn't even talk once about writing. Anyway, let's forget that. But the book is really good and really important. The second one is really fun and was written practically all by generative artificial intelligence, and it's called Hypnocracy. And it's about Trump and Musk. And it shows how Trump and Musk has turned everybody into a state of trance. That we can accept what's going on today, whether it's in Russia, Ukraine, or in Gaza and Israel, and this is just 2 very visible aspects of it. The fact that we can just sit here, we too are in a trance. Trance of fear, trance of confusion, trance of... Our situation today is to get out of the trance. And what I was suggesting to get out of the trance is to start not considering ever again that at the Anthropocene, the world run by humans is the right way to go. It simply isn't. The whole idea of the new democracy, if we have a rule of law, at least a rule of law, democracy and the rule of law are 2 different things. If we have a rule of law, it'll come from sharing with the rest of the planet subjecthood, voices. Tomorrow we will be able to, at least if not talk to birds, know what they're saying. We're already getting to know what whales are saying. We're going to be talking to the whole of nature. Rivers will talk to us. Forests will talk to us. This is what's coming with quantum computing. So we better get going.
We have ran out of time, but I might also let you have the opportunity. No, Katerina? I was just going to say, if you wanted to say anything, like one thing about reading is one way to defend, but just also at an Art, Technology and Society conference, I wondered if you had anything to say about also creating, if this is some option as well. But, would you like to say anything? Or no? Okay, well, thank you very much for these very provocative keynotes. It's a fantastic way to start the program. And we're now going to follow the program with a panel discussion. So this session will tackle the urgency that we've been discussing head on, as how we understand and respond to artificial intelligence. Unlearning the algorithm asks, how can we move beyond passive consumption of AI toward the critical engagement and agency that we've just been discussing? Moderating the session, I would invite Dr. Mairead Hurley to the stage. So Mairead Hurley is an assistant professor in science and society and education at Trinity College Dublin. Her research bridges science education, social justice, and participatory creative methodologies. She's especially committed to helping young people and communities rethink the relationship between science and society and technology. So Mairead, if you'd like to join the stage. She'll be joined by Amil Khan, a former journalist and government communication strategist who now leads Valiant Projects. His organization develops AI-powered tools that help civil society detect and counter online manipulation and disinformation. Drawing on frontline experience, he brings sharp insights into how AI is weaponized and how we might resist. Also, we'll be joining him, if you'd like to join also, is Ana Maria Salinas Boyaca, who works with the Tactical Tech, a global nonprofit that for over 2 decades has investigated how technology reshapes society. She supports NGOs and cultural institutions in building youth media literacy and civic tech education. With roots in journalism and political science, her work focuses on making complex issues accessible and actionable. And also, lastly, Professor Christoph Helm of Johannes Kepler University here in Linz, who heads the Department of Educational Research, where he studies how education systems adapt to technological change. His work spans teacher training, policy reform, and the social impact of AI in classrooms. So he'll bring a research-driven perspective on how to align innovation with democratic values. So I'll also ask you now to join the stage. So I'll hand it over to Mairead, and we kind of will continue this discussion we've started and look at how we can unlearn the algorithm. Thanks, Mairead.
Thanks, Andrew, and thanks everybody for being here, and thanks to my wonderful panelists here. It is hot. It is really, really hot. Wow. Okay, well, we'll try and get on with it anyway. So, in the spirit of the theme of the conference, we decided we would start with a very quick, just jumping straight into it, and asking everybody in this context of AI increasingly shaping the world around us and looking at the next generations, do we have the foundations that we need? Are our education systems resilient enough? And are our teaching strategies responsive enough? And so I'm going to ask each of you in 1 or 2 sentences, give us your answer. Should we panic? Yes or no? I'm going to start with Anna.
No. No, we are witnessing this high moment with the AIification of everything, right? Like we feel that AI has to be implemented in every single aspect of our lives. We don't need to panic as long as we don't fall for this hype and for this false narrative that tell us that we have to do that. So imagine like a school where students use AI to produce their homeworks, educators use AI to review the homeworks, and there is a chatbot to manage the relationships with parents. We don't want that. So that's not what's happening. What we're seeing is that there is an increase in the interactions between educators and young people that are investigating critically how technologies are affecting their lives. Inside and outside the classrooms, we're seeing more initiatives that want to preserve what make educational systems successful, which is creativity, human interaction, and human development. So there is hope.
Great, thank you. So firmly yes. So panic gets a no. Let's go on to Emil.
Thank you very much.
Oh.
Is that? Thank you. So I'm going to be the spoiler on this one and say yes, we should panic. So to give you some context, I work on information and information manipulation. And as a journalist and then in later work and what I do now, the focus has been on information because information is the glue of our human interaction. You can't, leaving politics aside for a moment, you can't decide where you want to send your children, you can't decide what you want to buy, you can't make decisions on the food you want to eat if the information that you're consuming and sharing doesn't have some element of trust and veracity in it. So it's fundamental. We started work at the company that I founded just before ChatGPT came on the market. And the difference in the way that manipulation can be done and the scale at which it can be done has grown exponentially. So imagine in the old days, somebody had to create an article, had to create a meme, had to put it together, and then put it on social media. And keep in mind that the platforms do try and take this stuff down to varying degrees. And if you wanted to create more, another one got taken down. A lot of people had to work on it. You don't need a lot of people now. You need one person and an LLM, and you can put that all together. So that means our information environment is vastly more untrustworthy, more manipulative, and that has impacts on all of us on an individual and collective level. But I would caveat my slight doom and gloom by saying the fact that we are panicking, or talking about panicking rather, means that we are now thinking about what to do next. And there are lots of things that we can do next, as long as we understand the severity and the danger of the situation we are in now.
Right, thank you very much. And Christoph, panic, yes, no?
I would also say no, because panic and negative emotions are never a good advisor. And negative emotions limit us in our thinking, in our flexibility of thinking. And from an educational research perspective, at least for the Austrian educational system, we are at the very beginning. Our system is still very analog. Teachers use digital tools and AI only in a very limited way, even or at least in primary school, of course, for didactic reasons, but also in secondary school and upper secondary schools, technical reasons, for instance, and other reasons keep teachers and students from using AI tools too much in classrooms. At least that's the status quo, but of course we are going more and more towards digitalization of teaching and learning. And here we would also join your argument that there are a lot of teachers and also students that do not use it in an unreflected way, but try to think about what they are doing. And for instance, a survey on students shows that more than 60% of students say that they do not want to outsource their learning to artificial intelligence tools like ChatGPT. They still want to learn because they want to get good grades, they want to get an exam, a diploma, and they want to be able to test whether ChatGPT was right or wrong. So,
great. So, Emil, maybe with you being the furthest on our panic spectrum towards the panic side of things, do you have any specific examples you could share with us about the cases, especially with young people and adults, that really are giving you that worry?
I can think of a recent example. So often when people talk to me about the AI in the information space and in politics, the first focus is elections. So I'll say which election has been, influenced or manipulated by AI. But I'll give a much more recent and much more everyday example. Right now in the UK, where I'm from, in the last month or two, we've had two policies the government has announced. One is that they want to publicize the ethnicity of people who commit crimes, or perpetrators. And the other was, in the last couple of days, they want to stop people who get asylum from bringing their families. Both of those policies started their life in a network of fake accounts. So they weren't popularly demanded by people. They were in themselves kind of manipulated as a narrative, as a demand amongst 1,000 fake accounts. We in the UK, in my company, monitors about 12 or 13 networks that reach 16 million people in total, multiple times a day. With that kind of power, you can influence what happens in policy. And two are just the ones that we've looked at recently. So you can imagine that at scale. And then if you think of that as the tip of the iceberg, you have to also think about things like toxic masculinity, so talking about young men in particular, talking about misogyny, all the Andrew Tate stuff, you know, there's a big well of those kind of things. Those aren't purely organic interest in young people, men or women. Those are things that are put on their timelines multiple times a day and are tested to hack their interest. And that is a very real example of our world being manipulated on a personal to a macro level every day.
Wow. Right. Thank you. Anna Maria, I'll go to you because I know Tactical Tech have been investigating the influence industry and looking at how perceptions are being shaped for young people as well. So can you tell us a bit more about that and what you're finding in that research?
Yeah, definitely. So we're all familiar with this term of influencers, but in this case, we're not talking about content creators. We're talking about an issue that is structural. And basically, I would like to start mentioning that the business model behind most of digital technologies, including AI, relies on the collection of the private data of their users. We know that. So we're talking from the social media we use to the search engines and the applications that we daily use to basically make decisions. These platforms are collecting our data to create digital profiles based on our interactions, our demographics, our interests. And for what purpose? Of course, to create personalized content, targeted ads that we receive on our phone. I don't know if you have this feeling that you get things and you feel that they are listening to you, like you think something and it's like, oh, I get this ad. And sometimes campaigns that can be misinformation campaigns. When we in Tactical Tech were investigating this, we focus also on elections and climate action, and we identified more than 500 companies between data brokers, communications agencies, marketing agencies that are accessing this data to support political parties. So what we see in the case of young people is that they are understanding and creating this recipe for social media using TikTok as the best way to convince people, to change the perceptions of young people regarding the critical topics that we're facing, from migrations, climate change, war. And it's working. It's proving that it's working. We see the results of the elections in several countries, and we have been investigating this. And what happened is, of course, young people rely heavily on digital technologies, and unfortunately, they are exposed to these strategies that cross the line from influence to manipulation. So that's what we're seeing. But on the other hand, we are also seeing how educators are bringing this topic to the classroom, and they are asking the critical questions. They are asking, okay, I'm receiving this ad, but who is behind this? What are the interests of this political party or this company? And why they have all that information about me, about myself, and what can I do about it? How can I protect my data? So this is one of the main challenges we're seeing, because of course it's defining the way how, as a society, especially young people, are perceiving the world and making decisions. And we have to focus on that.
Great, yeah, and that really speaks to our session theme around critical AI literacy. And I suppose if we think about critical literacy as coming from the tradition of Paulo Freire and thinking about reading the word to read the world, and in this case we're talking about not just text, but media or AI, algorithms, various media as they're used. I guess reading and asking critical questions about where they're coming from and all of that is that first step. And then the subsequent step, I suppose, then is creating with or creating alternatives. And I wonder, how much can we do that with AI? How realistic is it for young people to become users? I'd love to hear if that is something that, can we get in under the black box and under the hood and ask what's going on with AI and then work differently? So maybe, Christoph, if I come to you first in education, what are the strategies that are going on and what are the steps that educators are taking to build these critical literacies that we need?
Well, we in Austria, we had a reform, political educational reform, where we invented the subject digitale Grundbildung, so basic literacy of digitalization, and there are critical media literacy is, of course, an essential part. So we are just starting to try to educate future teachers to have these strategies, to use AI critically, to try to develop AI tools or to create AI tools and to govern them, and not just to use it in an unreflected way. And also, of course, there are future further education programs where this is also a topic. But I'm afraid that there are few concrete strategies that are really taught that enable teachers to make students aware of what they can do, in the sense what you were saying. I think we are at the very start here in the moment.
I think maybe this is where we can talk about partnerships and, collaborations between formal and non-formal and other sectors. So maybe, Anna Maria, if you'd like to talk about some of the work Technical Tech have done with, collaborating with young people and educators and other organizations and co-developing tools.
So basically in Tactical Tech, what we do is to partner with different actors of civil society, including educators, including young people, to create interactive, playful, and thought-provoking exhibitions, interventions, and toolkits. So we use this heavy component of arts because we believe new formats are needed to create these conversations. We have to take a step back from these traditional approaches and find new formats that allow us to invite people to engage in these conversations and in proactive actions. So this is what we do. And what's the way to scale it? Because we are a team of 20 people in Berlin. We cannot, reach all the countries, but we partner with schools, we partnered with museums, cultural centers, community centers, and these are the organizations that use these exhibitions, use these resources, they adapt them. They are creative under the Creative Commons license, so that guarantees that everyone has access to the educational resources. And basically, it's important to do that because we see also that there is this trend of publishing resources in English, in mainstream languages, that doesn't necessarily reflect the needs of the local communities. So if we partner with a school in Colombia, this school in Colombia understands what are the needs of that community. But I want to mention something that is very important. Why we partner with all these different profiles of organizations? Because when you partner with the schools, then you have the possibility of follow-up and have a long-term process. So that's perfect because you understand these changes in behaviors, for example, that our interventions are having. But if you partner with a museum, you are having a different kind of impact because when you have this kind of interventions or exhibitions, you are not only bringing young people and educators, you are bringing policymakers, you are bringing the parents, you are bringing other kind of stakeholders that surround the young people. So it's very important. It's a complementary kind of system, but it's important to cover both the formal and the informal educational system for this case.
Great, thanks so much. So maybe if we move out of that sphere and into maybe thinking about an AI commons, and this is a term that was suggested to me by our stage host Andrew as something we might discuss, and I think it's really interesting to think about. I suppose in recent years we've seen lots of leaps on, in terms of public participation in things like citizens' assemblies and policy, driving policy changes in Ireland. We've seen that to huge effect in terms of the legalization of abortion. We've also got the mainstreaming of citizen science and, involvement of, people in places where they're, were previously off limits to them. And even in some cases we see there are boards that have seats for nature and seats for future generations and use those voices and perspectives, I suppose, in taking decisions about land and development. And then, of course, youth and involving youth in spaces where previously they weren't. And so we have seen that in so many spheres, but is that possible, or is that something that we'll ever be able to get to in terms of AI, given the fact that we have these huge companies involved as well? So maybe, Emil, I might start with you. Just what are your thoughts about that? Are you optimistic about the possibility of involving citizens in decision-making around AI? Or what are the structures or infrastructures, mechanisms that we might need?
I think in reality, a very small amount of people get involved in sort of citizen participatory activity, but the point isn't always to get a high percentage. It's that there's a critical sort of mechanism where people's views are reflected and needs and everything else. But I would say that when we have this conversation about AI Commons, and AI Commons, or the whole idea behind it is framed through a media lens. What kind of media is available and what are the rights and copyright around it. AI is different in a lot of ways. One key thing to remember is that it has essentially become a commercial activity. And it's hard to row back from that. You remember that OpenAI started with a non-profit focus, and the money and the power, the potential for money and power quickly derailed it to being an enormously powerful and rich organization. And that's happened across the board. And AI is also, just from a technical perspective, it's more difficult to control than a piece of content, because you make you make the base model, and if it's an open source model and you release it, people can take it, download it, put it on their computer. I'm sure many people here already have done that and played around with it. And how do you legislate around that? And from my experience of dealing with of having conversations in a room with legislators from the UK and other European countries, the legislators don't understand the basic technical capabilities of this stuff and the commercial realities of it. It's totally, so they come from a very analog world where they think, well, we'll pass a law, we're the government. And then that will happen because we're the government, we've passed a law. But how does that work when a model can be made in China and deployed by a teenager in their basement in Milton Keynes, in Linz, in anywhere? And then also what if, and we'd see this on the communication side, if it's actually being deployed in Vietnam to make money, but targeting audiences in Linz, in London, and Berlin, and Paris. All of those things happen now and are really quite difficult to legislate around. So I would say, look at it from the base principles, and that is that it is a money-making enterprise. And if you think about it from a money-making enterprise, and you think, well, okay, what do people who are being asked to pay for this want, and what are they not happy about? Well, one of the things are that it hallucinates. It's not very accurate. If you're using it for work, there's all sorts of problems with it. And so we have seen companies that try and engage that further on the spectrum, like Perplexity, for example, over so the people who make Claude, over the people who make ChatGPT and OpenAI. So there are companies who are saying, look, you can trust us more. We'll make it more open. And we should be encouraging that, because it's not just on the basis of a nice thing to do and it's a nice principle, it's that the end user will get more benefit out of it if it is more reliable.
Okay, thank you. So maybe on the same topic of AI Commons and maybe, thinking about that in relation to education, Christoph, do you have any thoughts you want to add on that, or even around how schools and maybe local governments might collaborate on AI-related topics differently?
Yeah, I think this is an issue, and at least for Austria, it's an issue in general, not only for AI issues, but maybe specific for AI. That in education research, there's this idea of educational landscape. So schools are collaborating with actors outside from school, with municipalities, with youth clubs, music clubs, sports clubs. They're collaborating with the local fire brigade, and they and all different stakeholders from the local region that want to are interested to think about how can we evaluate or uplift learning in that region. And in Austria, there is unfortunately not a culture of thinking of education in that way. But I think that would be a great tool to not only have the schools as a centralized organization where learning takes place, but to make it more decentralized in a community and all the stakeholders involved in the community, in the local community. And I only know for one example, there is an association called Future Region Steyr. Steyr is a small city in Upper Austria, and more than 140 partners and stakeholders are part of this network, and they, from time to time, they meet and think about what can they do for the region to foster learning, to raise human capital, and it would be, I think it would be a great idea, and I'm sure they will talk about AI as well. If they have not done it yet, they will do it soon. And I think to use AI in a reflected way, this could be a great tool because they can exchange idea experiences and try to make a common sense on how to use AI in a reflected way.
Yeah, great. Yeah, those kind of collaborative hubs around education are certainly something that we're trying to do in Ireland as well. And it's really hard. The systems are not set up to make breaking down those walls between school and community easy. It often takes one, dedicated person who does that and makes the change. And I see it in sustainability actions a bit. But yeah, the initiative you shared is really interesting because getting it to that scale means that it's not just one person driving it. Great. So maybe Anna Maria, if I come to you then to ask you, maybe could you speak about maybe the future that you might see where young people are co-investigators in, rather than users or consumers? Are there examples that you have that you know of from your work that you can share with us?
Yeah, definitely. I would like to go back to what you were saying about the business models, and I think it's something that we have to talk about, this black box. No, the business model works because technology is still this thing that is magic, that we don't understand how it works. And to empower young people, we need to create spaces where we open, like this, when influencers do this opening of boxes, this is what we have to do with technologies and explain not only what is inside the box, but what is around the box. So what are the power structures around these technologies, how large language models work, how algorithms work, how these industries of gaming works. And what we've been doing, and then I'm going to go to the specific case, is that we have a project to focus on youth that is called What the Future Wants. And as I was mentioning, we come together with the students and educators. We identify the topics they want to cover in these exhibitions. We work together to design the exhibitions, and then they host them, right? The last exhibition that we hosted, or that we produced, is called Everywhere All the Time. And it's very provoking because it's what we feel when we talk about AI. It's like everywhere all the time, and it's so overwhelming. But this exhibition was opening the box again. It was explaining all these different elements and empowering young people to ask critical questions, right? To decide how they want to shape their relationship with technologies. And when educators use these resources, we have seen changes not only in the levels of awareness, so young people are more informed about these situations, but also changes in their behaviors. And I'm going to give you an example of an organization in Africa. It's the International Young Catholic Students Association, and they have schools in Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Rwanda. What they did was to use these resources to build the capacity of young people. The 200 young people participated in these exhibitions, participated in the conversations. They follow this peer-to-peer model. So that means that they are building the capacity of young people to become facilitators, to become leaders. These 200 people went back to their communities and they hosted exhibitions, they hosted workshops with their own communities. So the impact at the end of this intervention, it was not the 200 people, but 2,000 people, because they hosted again and created this multiplier effect. In this case, there was a movement of women that created a WhatsApp group across these 3 different countries called Digital Girls. And basically what they do is young people, only young people. There are no educators involved, only young people, is to exchange experiences, exchange tips, practices, of course, support each other when they find challenges in the digital landscape. And finally, something that also came out from that experience is that UNESCO saw how well this peer-to-peer model works, and they asked the organization in Africa to provide them with advice so they could include this in their practices. So we can see how this example shows that using creative approaches that are not necessarily the traditional ones, when we involve artists, when we involve designers, and we empower people, young people, is when the real change happens.
Great, thank you. It's hugely inspirational. Fantastic. So maybe as we come towards the end, we might ask each of you to just maybe sum up your thoughts on what we need to do next as we face into the future in terms of youth, education, critical AI literacy. We're in this post-digital reality where the analog and the digital are all mixed up together. So what are the next steps, I suppose, in the context of your own work? Emil, I'll start with you.
I would like to see good actors getting better at using AI and specifically in the context of information and knowledge. And I think that we are heading towards a world where you're either going to use information, and part of that in my world is AI, in a way that will vastly improve your life, because you'll be able to get information without the gatekeepers, and the amount of information you'll be able to get, the amount of stuff you'll be able to process is huge and vast, but you have to be a conscious consumer of it. If you aren't in that group, you run the risk of being having value extracted from you, your likes, your attention, and you'll basically be a revenue center for a large organization, and you'll just be given a whole bunch of stuff, bad content that's just designed to hack your brain, keep your eyes glued on the screen, and then that turned into money for somebody else. So what I would like to see is educators, journalists, organizations themselves, because we communicate directly to our audiences now. We don't necessarily need the media as an intermediary. I would like to see them all getting a lot better at AI, and a lot better at content creation, and a lot better ultimately at understanding their audience. And that would be a net gain from where we were 10, 15 years ago.
Great. And just before you move on, where are those good actors going to go to get better? Who's going to help them? What should they be looking at to give them the support that they need?
So a large part of that self-empowerment actually comes from being able to access it yourself for free. We live in a world now where you can get a lot of the technical information, the best sort of technical information on AI is moderated peer-to-peer networks on YouTube or wherever. You still have to filter it.
Yeah.
You still have to decide, but people have to do that, and they do that themselves. And if you do it right, then you can get to the level of a pretty good data scientist just on YouTube videos at this point. And I talk to people who are quite senior. We recruit people who are quite senior. And I have a colleague, and I have asked him, you did an MA in Imperial or somewhere in the UK. Did you feel that MA got you to the level you're at now? And they said, no, I just needed a tick on my CV. I'd already gotten everything I needed to learn beforehand from online. So you can do that, but there is a place for funders, for governments, and that has always been, is to sort of shape the environment. So if you're making AI and you need compute power and that costs you money, is there a mechanism for the government to step in and say, well, if you're doing these kind of projects that help society, help the economy, then we could give you that for free or for less money or whatever, and have that sort of facilitating role. But the core knowledge at this point is highly democratized in a good sense.
Right. So it's more of an awareness that I need to do this, and I need to make it a priority for those people, and then to go and be committed to it.
Absolutely. I think everyone, and I don't speak as somebody who comes from a technical background, I come from languages and journalism and foreign affairs, but everyone, I think, right now can benefit immensely from learning to code and some data science.
Great, thank you. Anna Maria, come to you next. What is the next big action?
So I would like to summarize it in 5 steps. The first one, there is the need to continue experimenting with new formats that engage people in a creative ways. The second one, more spaces for educators, to support educators as learners, so where they can learn about technologies and about these new formats are needed. The third one is that we need to continue experimenting with this peer-to-peer model, because it's the only way to create impact in the long term, and just demystify this idea of education in a vertical way, where it's the educator and the students. Now we have to work under these new kind of approaches. The fourth element is that we cannot do it alone. So that's why we have a strong focus on collaboration. We need to collaborate with big organizations, with policymakers, with the educators, and this is the only way to bring forward all these changes. And the last thing, I'm gonna go back to what I said at the beginning. Just forget about the narratives that we are consuming, and these narratives that are fed by big technologies, big companies that say that everything is magic and we're going to solve all the issues of the world with AI. That is not the case, and we need to continue having these critical conversations, especially with young people, so they are going to be able to advocate for more transparent technologies that really serve society, and that can also hold this big tech into account. So this is my last one.
Great, thank you. And Christoph?
Yeah, I would like to add 3 points. First of all, I think it needs more discussions like this one, especially in our education context.
But somewhere less hot.
Sorry?
Somewhere less hot.
Yeah. Right. I think it's not too hot, but because this discussion triggered me to think about ethical issues of using AI in educational context, which was not so much in my focus until now, but it's really, really important. Second, in that regard, we have to invest a lot of more effort in teacher education, in our educational system in general. And last but not least, because our conclusion is not to panic, I brought a citation or a text from a guy you all know, Platon, an ancient Greek philosopher. He was at his time saying, this invention will cause forgetfulness in the souls of those who learn it, because they will no longer exercise their brain, trusting in what is written. They will allow themselves to be reminded from outside by science, not from inside by themselves. So he was complaining that script, text, writing will lead to the society to get more stupid and more stupid. And I hope that we are, with regards to AI, a little bit like Platon, very cautious, but in the end it will lift the competences of society, because I think text and writing brought a lot of good things.
Great, thank you. And I think I actually had a very similar wrap-up point that I wanted to make, and from Plato to Douglas Adams, because when I saw the theme straight away, my mind went to this book, which has been my kind of guiding philosophy since I first encountered it. I was 17-year-old undergrad studying astronomy, and it helped me to make sense of the tininess of myself in this vast universe that we're in. And The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, if anyone doesn't know it, by Douglas Adams, talks about a guide about this size, about this something like this, that has in large friendly letters on the front, "Don't panic." And I think it's as timely now as when the book or when the series first appeared in 1978. And I think Douglas Adams recognized then in his prescient wisdom that panic is modernity's favorite drug. So whenever a new technology shows up, like writing for Plato or like television or internet or AI, our reflex is panic. So the idea students are going to cheat, teachers will be obsolete, civilization will collapse. We've heard this over and over. But panic does kind of locks us into this control mode, and we react and we regulate and we moralize, but we stop imagining. And I think that's something that education really is all about, imagination, and it's what it's supposed to be for. So I think maybe we're at risk of letting AI become our total perspective vortex, and we're not, panic might be refusing to recognize the fact that we are actually really, really tiny and insignificant in this huge, vast, absurd universe that we're in. And so, maybe the idea of don't panic is to kind of be okay with the fact that, we should laugh at ourselves. We're small, we're tiny, but we're here. We can be curious. We can go into this future and explore what our future with AI is like, without giving away our agency to it. So I think that's where the critical AI literacy for me comes in. It's not about the technical skills about engaging with AI, but really engaging with those epistemological and ethical issues and looking at the role it has in knowledge production. And so hopefully we can ask our students and we can work with our students about dealing with that complexity and dealing with the futures that we can't be sure of and that might make us panic, but hopefully we can help them not to. So that's really where I'm coming to this for me anyway. I don't know if anyone has changed their opinion over the course of our conversation, but I think it's been really interesting to hear from everyone on this. So we have about 5 minutes for some questions. If anyone would like to ask any questions of our panelists, we have a roving mic in the audience. We have one over here, at the front.
So, hello, thank you. Thank you for sharing all this good idea. And I'm a journalist, Italian journalist, dedicated to the innovation technology. I would like to know if there is one of you or all of you that are promoting some new kind of program for the school education in Europe, in the world, in a nation, because otherwise we are, as you said well, we are always telling we don't have to panic. Education is the only thing that can make the change, but how to begin? Do you have an idea how to begin to wake up all the Ministry of Education?
Well, it's probably a good moment to mention the European project that this this conference is in the context of, which my organisation, Trinity College Dublin, our School of Education, we're part of, and Tactical Tech, Anna's organisation, are part of. So it's it's funding from the European Commission to explore democracy education, and it really has given us a chance, I think, to really experiment with what democracy education needs to be for the future. And so some of us are looking at different topics, maybe more focused on climate and sustainability. Others are looking more at technical AI-related topics. So I know the work in Finland that you'll hear about, but you'll hear about some of those in the next panel, I think. Is that correct? After the keynote, yeah. So if you stick around, you'll definitely hear some of those. And it's it's innovating. It's small organisations, but it has the backing of the European Commission, which I think is really positive. Anna, is there anything maybe from the Critical ChangeLab project that you would mention in particular, like any of the practices or approaches?
Yeah, I think so. So I think that the first answer for you is collaboration, and we are experimenting that, because alone Tactical Tech couldn't do what we are doing together with these 10 organizations. We are bringing academics, we are bringing people working in arts, in policy, together to experiment with these different formats, creative formats. This is the second thing, doing it creatively, not from this traditional approach. So I think that's the base for what's happening. And it's effective. I'm going to tell you from the case of Tactical Tech in the Critical ChangeLab. We've seen how these interventions, maybe through theater, I've seen things with puppets, with music, with different kind of approaches, the changes that creates in young people and in educators. We've seen this in the Critical ChangeLab, and we see that also in the other projects of Tactical Tech. And I can tell you, in the case of Tactical Tech, that we've been working in this education field for 20 years. At the end of this process, we had partners in 90 countries. We work with 500 organizations, schools, community centers, and we've been reaching out like around 30 million people. So there is a process, of course, but collaboration is key to make this happen. Otherwise, it's going to be like isolated initiatives. So definitely collaboration. Mm-hmm.
I have a silly question.
That's why your microphone's off.
Is it off? No, it's on now. I have a very silly question. My English is failing me. What does unlearning the algorithm mean? It's a very strange expression, and yeah, what does it mean?
Are you a journalist by any chance?
Huh?
Are you a journalist by any chance?
No, I'm not a journalist. No,
Well, I might comment. Sorry, please. No, please.
That's a good question. I don't know either, but when I was preparing for the session here, I came across an article from a scholar who was doing a review on studies and literature that was about or were about ethical issues of AI use. And one critical issue was that AI or technical tools in general could lead to more standardization in education. And that was interesting because the argument using AI tools is that it is leading to more individualization, more personalization, because ChatGPT can make a learning plan for anyone individualized to his or her needs. But this article is arguing it's the other way around, because these algorithms behind these models are, these are technical rules, and they are somehow standardizing. They have a common database. They are more thinking of an average student, and so there are predefined learning parsers. And when everyone is using ChatGPT and Co for learning, was that argument, then the algorithms will work in a way that learning is more standardized than individualized. That was interesting. I'm not sure if that's true, but I think if this is an issue, then it would be good if teachers are aware of the algorithms behind that. Maybe they could be an example for lifting the black box and to learn about algorithms. I don't know if that's possible, but I'm too less a software engineer. But yeah.
I think for me at least is to demystify this idea of technology, define these ideas, and just relearn that we can reshape our role with technologies. We are not just subjects, we are agents, and we have power. So I think this is what it means, that we have to change this narrative, forget what they have told us, and just set the future we want.
I might also add, as the one that wrote the title, it was the idea a bit more also to consider that the algorithm, not only as sort of this algorithm we talk about in the AI and the black boxes, but I wanted to play with the idea that education itself and our educational system and our ways of learning are in a sense an algorithm, and to kind of like sort of unpack that a bit and sort of like rethink about how we're sort of like doing these instructions. I think also what kind of like one of the things that you mentioned, Derek, at the beginning is that like we don't imagine space. We just follow instructions when we kind of like lose that sort of interior sort of ways. So the idea about unlearning the algorithm was more about sort of like, let's like really like rethink about how education as a way of teaching is an algorithm itself, and not just like AI, because I think with the new literacies required, the models really need to sort of adjust significantly. So like we're talking about sort of the Plato and sort of the origins of literacy are still a lot of school education. That is what literacy is. It doesn't include like information, media literacy, like literacy as well. And these are the things that are shaping our world very much as well. So that's why I kind of like played with that.
I think there was one last word from Emil, and then we'll wrap it up. But thank you very much.
The way I took that phrase was dismantling, disassembling the algorithm, and I think similar to what Andrew was just saying. I would caveat that, like, so if you think about journalism, when people talk about media literacy, they are saying that you should be able to understand, people should be able to understand the decisions, the basis, the parameters that are set up by editorial organizations that result in a story, in an article that moves around the world and shapes our world. And you can download that. You can download BBC's editorial guidelines, you can download Reuters, you can download most newspaper organizations. And those are their editorial guidelines, that is their algorithm. But we now have an algorithm that you really can't disassemble or investigate, because it comes back to the commercial point I made. So companies like Facebook, like TikTok, all the others, they're never going to give you access to their IP, essentially, their algorithms. But those things define young people, all of us, their worlds, because they're in front of us. How do they decide? What is the sort of algorithm, the mathematics and the psychology behind what we see every day? We don't know, and we're not going to find out. So I think that's the conundrum we have to deal with.
Great. So on that note, thank you so much, Emil. Thank you, Anna Maria. Thank you, Christoph. And thank you to all of you.
Yes, thank you very much, everyone. And we're going to follow on now with our next keynote. I might also use this opportunity to give a little sort of promotion to tomorrow's topic. So very much this question that kind of came up, like what is the education, how do we change the education system to respond to these challenges? And tomorrow we're going to be very much focusing on the non-formal learning environments of like cultural organizations, of organizations like Tactical Tech that have the capacity to rapidly respond to these things that are happening right now. Because as we very much know that the education systems in terms of like formal schooling and like curriculum is a much slower process. So tomorrow we can dive a bit more into that. So our next speaker is Simona Levy, techno-political strategist, activist, theatre director and founder of XNet. She has led campaigns exposing political financial corruption in Spain and pioneered innovative tools for digital democracy. Simona is widely recognized as one of Europe's most fearless and forward-looking voices on rights in the digital age. In her keynote, she reframes panic around technology, not as a fear of change, but as a fear of losing power. So thank you, Simona, very much for joining us, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, all of you. Thank you for the invitation. So, first of all, some tips on what will going on next. I will first of all speak in creative English, so really please, if you don't understand what I'm saying, will you interrupt me? Then also what I want to bring is, in my digital activism, my company, it's not a company, my organization was founded in 2008, and so with my digital activism, with my comrades, we had brought to conviction 65 politicians and bankers from all the political parties, from left to right. 15 of them, they went to jail, and even the ex-minister of economy of Spain and the president, former president of the International Monetary Fund. What I want to say is that I will speak from a very practical and activist point of view, in the sense that sometimes we can win. So that's my starting point. So I'm also afraid that I won't be speaking about very particularly blinking topics like AI or and probably nothing that you don't already know. But I will have to read also because of my English. But I believe that the difficult and dark times we are living through now, with obvious injustice and obvious misgovernance, demand that we urgently recap to defend basic and obvious things. So let's us learn from from mistake of the history. I will grab from the example that Christopher just brought in. I think that history serves as a mirror, because the first mistake we often make is to believe that what is happening to us has never happened to anyone else before. This is why it's important for me that we start from history. The internet is certainly unique in history, but the impact of networks and information technology on human society is as old as humanity itself. Since immemorial times, those in power have feared any advance that threatens their control over access to information. This fear of disintermediation repeats itself with every technology that directly empowers people. A very old example is this Plato example. This is in the dialogue of Phaedrus. Plato, through the voice of Socrates, recounts an Egyptian fable about Teut, the inventor of writing, and the king Ammon. Ammon, far from accepting writing as an elixir of memory and wisdom, sorry, no, I cannot change, yeah. I make a little noise, but no. Okay, yeah. He warns. So in this dialogue, what Plato says through the voice of Socrates, it warns that writing instead will weaken the memory, foster mental laziness. It would create a false appearance of wisdom and produce ignorant influencers. Influencer is not the word that he used, I use it, but for you to understand my point. And he will discontextualize knowledge and replace live dialogue with the bubble of solitary monologue. So I think, so we hear this very often about AI, technology, etc. But I think we have had time to discover that all those things, we have it in any case with or without technology. It's something inherent to human condition, is not inherent to the technology. So another common comparison between information technology and the digital revolution is the invention of printing press. You cannot see much, but I will explain you the graphics. I cherish very much this example because I'm very much amused about how identically is the evolution, even in the length of the period. So we see two phases, basically. We have a first phase of expansion. The first phase of expansion of the printing press produces in a part of the world a revolutionary renewal of thoughts to the point of splitting Christianity in two and paving the way for Enlightenment and the French Revolution in one case, and producing a hacker culture and revolutionary movement between 2010 and 2014 in the other, in our period. So this first part, this part of disintermediation, is really repeat in the same period, 1 millennium, half a millennium ago, and now with the digital technology. This is disintermediation, and mean that the intermediary in power reduce their power. But then it comes the reintermediation reaction. That is the second half. We have just started it. But if we read story, we know what could happen if we don't react in time. So we are just at the beginning of the reintermediation in the same metrica. The reintermediation reaction impose censorship, ban contents, and forge alliance between old power and new intermediary. The Protestant Shiism leaders' entry to the elite mirrors, as an example, what is happening today with government, the relation between government and big tech. So the same reactionary move appears. It destroys distribution, re-centralize control, and exploit the democratic benefit of disintermediation through panic-driven propaganda. Promoting a narrative of fear and panic has always been the first step toward repressing any movement toward a greater democracy. In panic, people seek protection and demand guidance from authority. And this can only be achieved through fear and training of docility. This is why Sam Altman say that only him can protect a fair use of the ChatGPT. So this is exactly this panic and new relation between the power that is in place and the new intermediary. Okay. This is why all my effort as an activist are devoted to countering the fear of the internet and the AI. Of course, I don't deny the problems. We have talked about it today. And I don't deny the problem they generate, just as I would not do it with fire or with the will. But I believe that fear of digital and fear of AI already has plenty of loud and official arenas for its advocates. My duty is not to speak out against the digital itself, but against those who keep digital technology off the path of democracy, means many of our institutions, I'm afraid. So, as we know, to discuss data is to discuss control. It raises questions such as who can know where we are, what we do by day, what we do by night, what tastes, convictions, vices, pleasures, needs, sorrows we have. In other words, who controls us. This is the core of what I call the democratic digitalization of society. My research in this field has led me to shape that definition, partly through observing that Europe's educational system is, on an average, 80–90% digitalized using big tech tools. This research resulted in a 188 pages report commissioned to me by the former President of European Parliament, David Sassoli, through the publication office of the European Union, entitled Proposal for a Sovereign and Democratic Digitalization of Euros. And this also result, and also to ask to the person, I don't think she's in the audience anymore, about practical things, result into developing an alternative prototype for education, which is currently being tested since 2020 as a pilot project in the city of Barcelona in 10 schools. So I'm speaking again from a practical perspective. When I talk about democratic digitalization, I'm talking about sovereignty for the people, digital sovereignty for the people. I mean, democratic digitalization refers to a digital transition based on human rights by design and by default. And sovereignty digitalization refers to a digitalization in which even the smallest actor in the democratic architecture, this means each citizen, not the state, each citizen, if we talk about democracy, can control in a disintermediated way the use and destination of the content they create and the data they generate. The narrative around the digitalization often focus on very blinking matters. However, there is a forgotten, boring, but unavoidable layer before all this, the one that enables daily digital life in all activity of society, from essential services to individual use. I simply mean content creation, storage, online interpersonal communication, browsing, and even internet access. So before we talk about AI, that we have to talk about AI, or let's say not before, at the same time, we also have to talk about the layer we put on all these new tools. This layer is often taken for granted by our institutions. For many of them, and I am sure that the rest will not be offended when I say this tremendous truth, for many of them, digitalization has happened as a meteorological phenomenon. This is clearly a neglection of duty and often a corrupt, easy path for our institutions. When the basic layer of daily digital life systematically violates the right of its users everything that is done with it, no matter how blinking it is, will happen in a framework without democratic guarantees. So, what to do? In order to comply with democratic principle at the basis, the digital daily tools must permit A, and I repeat, I bring all this example and this investigation from the example in school because it's the more clear example of a digitalization that is not done in a democratic way by our own institutions. So, in order to comply with the basic democratic principle, the digital tools must permit A, as I said, that user remain in control of data and contents, and to have A, we need B, the possibility to audit the tools to know what they are executing. This means that their source code must be accessible, available to be audited in a distributed and disintermediated manner by anyone, by the institution and by the users, and by the schools in this case. From this perspective, only sovereign server and free software tools meet those requirements. Free software has also another fundamental advantage. It promotes entrepreneurship as it is available to both the public and private sector, maximizing the value of public investment in a competition with big tech, big private tech that have 10 years of the advantages on Europe. On the contrary, the dominance of a few big tech companies in providing the basic digital, even in institutional and essential services such as education, sends a very strong signal to the market that digitalization can occur at the expense of small and medium-sized companies, of innovation, and often on human rights too. I think the email tool is the clear example of what I mean. This is the official data from the education in Catalonia that say that the 82% in primary school and the 87% in secondary school are using Google. Gmail for email and Google Cloud and Google Tools, everything. And this is not only Catalonia, this is the average between Google and Microsoft in the whole EU. It's the same figures, more or less. Okay, where I was. Okay, the email. It is estimated that 3.9 billion individuals use email services. According to Google, approximately out of these 3.9 billion, 1.5 billion use Gmail. And other 400 million users have Microsoft emails accounts. The forward mentioned actors are dominant players in the email market that they have penetrated by offering an email services free of charges. Gmail is free of charges, despite the fact that it is a service with a high cost. This has a name, and this name is dumping in economy. The free provision of these services by for-profit companies is problematic in a market that claims to be competitive and democratic. The result is a dominant player situation, a de facto private monopoly in an essential infrastructure such as interpersonal communication. Furthermore, email services are currently designed as centralized services, so it means that every email goes through Gmail servers to reach the recipient. And this raised several issues related to the right to the secrecy of communication, a right that we achieved in 18th century, 3 centuries ago. In this context, it is important to analyze to what extent the right to inviolability of communication, which is essential for democratic societies, can be left exposed by our institution to profit interest in an unbalanced market. The fact that this service is currently designed as a centralized service, apart from being privacy sensitive, It's above all inefficient and somehow absurd. In the age of networks, the fact that in order to write to each other, we still have to go through a centralized mediator is simply anachronistic. Certainly, it does not respond to logical reason, but to domination reasons. This is why, one second, please. So we're getting there. This is why I advocate for creating a free, as in freedom, public code for all essential services, emails, education, administration, taxes, and so on. Public in the sense of cooperative, not state-dominated. There are timid institution efforts in this direction, but they need to be coordinated, radical, and urgent to prevent the situation from worsening. The time is now, and our institution must recognize it. One of the key solutions lies in public tenders. There is a recurring malpractice in public procurement throughout Europe. These are data from the European Commission. I will explain it to you. This malpractice is the systematic violation of national and European regulation on public procurement that, since Directive 22 and 24 of 2014, 11 years ago, required institutions to split public tenders in small lot to favor small and medium-sized companies. The data from the European Commission itself show that a large majority of EU countries do not even achieve 50%. So the green one, the very good one, they are not reach even the 50%. The rest is less. That means that the public tender are shaped only for great monopoles, great companies. In short, the sustainability, so what we see here is the lack of lotization, or making contract in a way that other economic digital ecosystem can participate, and not only big company and basically big tech. In short, the sustainability of sovereign and democratic digitalization requires antitrust and investment policies that reaches small, medium company and talent and protect digital rights. That is to say, the simple enforcement of the EU legislation. So I'm afraid that I have to say that our institutions are violating the law. Furthermore, the institutions are also responsible for allowing the penetration in essential services of big tech products that cost them zero, like the email. This is the case in education, in health, administration, the email, blah, blah, blah. It is essentially a violation of the right to conduct a business of the population. Because, first, this occurs outside of public procurement with the excuse that the cost is zero. And second, the dumping levels the playing field, preventing competitors from emerging by allowing the beneficiary to grow to a point of becoming unreachable. The fact that people use not auditable software may be because we have no other option or we cannot adapt. However, when an institution continues to use non-auditable, non-interoperable software on a daily basis, is systematically violating the right of the population. For all these reasons, we have to work to establish first the co-creation of sovereign servers and a free, auditable and interoperable European code for public essential services. This is accessible to any institution, company, and individual. Second, the establishment of the correct and prompt enforcement of Directive 22 and 24, 2014, so that people and companies of all sizes throughout Europe can contribute to this code and those servers and benefits from providing derivative services based on it. This means create a solid entrepreneurial ecosystem around digital in Europe instead of keeping crying for its absence. Okay, so let's return to panic and propaganda. Because what truly sustains all this nonsense is the virulent technophobia of mainstream discourse, where digital is portrayed as evil. Another major contemporary issue that the mainstream treats as if it were an historical novelty is misinformation. Here, for example, it's so new that here you can have an example of, is the proclamation of the restraint of spreading of false news and licentious talking by King Charles II in 1685. So the measure and the narrative, they lay the groundwork for the policy around disinformation, focus on the fault of internet users, and embrace a logic of control and censorship over the content by either public or private players. This policy neglects subjects who generate and benefit from disinformation the most. In fact, all road to the source of systemic disinformation lead to the same place, the political parties, their structure of sponsor and client, and their institutions. Fake news is far from a new phenomenon. It is also not a novelty that those who hold the monopoly on manipulation of information use manipulated information as an excuse to champion law that curtail freedom of expression and freedom of information and criminalize the use of the new technology, such as, in this case, the internet and the AI. In other words, we must dismantle the narrative framework of propaganda surrounding disinformation. This is my report on the subject. So, throughout history, it has been not the general public, but government, institution, political party, mass media, wealthy individual and powerful corporation in not particular order, who have been primarily responsible for creating and disseminating the disinformation that altered the course of history. This is for a straightforward reason. They are the ones who can afford it. The fact that ordinary people, we only play an instrumental role in creating systemic lie is not because of any intrinsic moral superiority. To achieve real massive reach in the creation of this information, one needs resources, and ordinary people simply do not have them. For this reason, to fight disinformation, I propose another strategy. Let's follow the money. Disinformation causes a massive impact when institutions and investments promote it, aiming to generate political, financial, or other benefit. By focusing on profit, the behavior of institutions and the financial transactions surrounding the creation and the circulation of information, for example, paying in Facebook, we can avoid maiming freedom of expression, which is admittedly imperfect but can be practiced for free, and deal with something that can be regulated, which is business and institution. With this approach, we propose a duty of verification attached to institutions and or payment made and received to emit and spreading information. I mean the business around the information. I'm not talking about providing the truth, just the requirement to show how the information has been verified, as in the Code of Conduct of Journalism. So, we have to follow the money, we have to follow the factual reality. So let's stop forcing what is good and bad. This is not untruth, it is just useless in the strategy against disinformation. Democracy should not ever mean everybody agreeing. Disagreement is the path for improvement. Stigmatizing disagreement leads to polarization, trolling, and fanaticism. Democracy should be the art of living together in disagreement. It is dangerous to emphasize that what we expect is that millions are agreeing ideologically, because unfortunately we already do that. So let's move from a political narrative promoting gregarious ideological fanaticism towards ongoing cooperation based on a healthy mistrust among adults. So to conclude, Here my suggestion. For a better democracy, let's write the priorities. Don't blame the people, don't blame the internet, don't blame the AI, blame the power. Thank you very much.
Minutes for questions. So if anyone has questions for Simona, we have a roving mic. This one question over here.
Oh.
Nope.
Now? Yeah. Thank you, Simona, for your talk. I would like to ask you if you have any country that is a good reference, that is doing it better, maybe not perfect, but that we could look at as a model for like doing this digital sovereignty in education or in other spheres that you can think of.
Yes, yes. I'll answer straight away.
Yep.
Yeah. Yes, thank you for your question. So on the side of disinformation, none. But on the side of digital sovereignty, there is country in which, so since we have started the process in the education, this was 2019, every time, so we had a plan in order to substitute the Google Suite in the School of Barcelona, because what is very important to say is that the free software, existing free software, to completely substitute all what the big tech tools for education at least does, already exist, and even exist before. But it was relegated by institution that, so we need institutions supporting what is there, because it's already there, and it's really cheap to bring a solution, an alternative to the big tech model with server that we control, where the school can enter their own server to see if the documents are there, if they were processed, etc. So when we start this process, and we started, and the city of Barcelona accepted to do the pilot, all the time when a state or a region, the data protection officer say that they were forbidding the use of big tech in this country, I was phoning the same day, say, no problem, here we are, please help us to build this tool. So we know that the first one was Denmark, but Denmark is still hesitating, but Netherlands, France, with some city in Italy, we are talking very closely, and in fact, also Finland, so there is places, but what I really missed as an activist is that every country respond, yes, but we have to be the starters. So they, even with free software that is there, that everybody can get it, they want to be the first one. So we are still, when I say that all the problem are political party, it's true. As I am 40 years doing activism, and there is so many nonsense, because we have all the ingredients to be really sovereign and to push in this direction, but policy and political party policy, which is not the real policy, are really blocking that this go out faster, and that we unify effort to have one only code.
Any other questions there? We'll start here.
Hello, thank you so much. I would like to ask you if you have any advice for a student to make any changes inside the institutions.
Yeah, in Spanish you say hostias como panes. So it's very difficult with the logic to convince institutions. You have to do it by the force of multitude or strong. So it's, at least in the south of Europe, I don't know, in Austria, or I don't know where are you from, but in the south of Europe, these strong political parties' needs are really in contrast. So you have a lot of difficulties. There is always good people in an institution, but they are struggling very much to push, especially to create changes, because the change scares the institution. Because, you know, when you change, someone will not be happy. For example, the big tech. The second day we start the project, Google called me and asked me to go straight to Madrid to talk. So if they have done it with me, they have done it with all the politicians. So why having problem with Google? We are so happy, we don't pay for it. So, you know, it's difficult to find a politician or an institution that will go for having a discussion, for example, with Google. Also because Google does their work, they don't have to do much. Google digitalizes schools, so I just come and go home. I have no problem at all. So the first thing you have to do is to look for the good public servant, the one that they are inside and they are there to really change things. And then you don't need much people, but you need argument. For example, what we have, and this is why it works also, that there were families asking us, they didn't want to sign for Google. So there were association of family that was, I would say the 10% of the the students in family of students in Catalonia, they are in favor. So we have 1 million in the public schools, so this means 100,000, which is still not very big. It's a 10%, but 100,000 is okay. So you need figure and data that force them to change. The first answer was not this is fair or not fair to be sovereign, because the EU is speaking about sovereignty, but all the EU, I don't know if you ever visit, but everything is on Microsoft, but they are speaking about sovereignty every day, but everything is on Microsoft. The first thing that's said to me is not it's fair or not fair what you propose, because maybe there is not demand enough. So we need to show that, yes, there is demand. There is people that want to be sovereign with their data in schools, for example.
One more question, Avi.
Okay. Thanks, Simon. One kind of, I guess that you're like dealing with it and it's part of the process, this thing that you're mentioning about like the changing like or facing the politicians. And I'm just for like the context, I would say that in Catalonia, I was like almost 20 years ago that they were like doing this change to free open source software in education and it moves. So
yes.
I don't want to get into the panic, but for me that was also like thinking of, okay, if that happened at that point, how we can make something that is actually lasting, because they were already implementing it. So do you have like I know it's in the process, but do you have like tips, advices about how to infrastructure a change that can last and we are not kind of going backwards because when there is a political change?
Yes, that's a very important point, because I've studied the implementation of free software in education for a long time. I even went to Uruguay, in which there is a program from the state that gives to kids free software, hardware and software when they were and there is a recurrent error that we do, the good side, which is that we need the institution to, because it's up till now is on the shoulder of people that make the effort or using free software, and so you are a specimen alone in a corner in a ghetto, and so this is why I don't say, for example, our pilot, we have other 50 schools, it's on 10 schools, we have other 50 schools that want it, but I say the code is still not strong enough to make it bigger, and it would be worse to start with a code that is not very good, because then the people would say, oh, Google is much better, because I must say, Google works perfectly, and you have no problem whatsoever. So we have to this is why I insist on institution. We need the institution to shift, and it's the same fight as public education or private education, public health or private health, is the same. Do we want a public democratic code for Europe? And so I never blame the people for using Gmail, because often if you are not a bit an activist or something, you don't have other options. So, and this is because Gmail have destroyed, I am older than many of you, so at the beginning there were a lot of alternatives for email. Now there is none, because of course they offer it for free. So there is nothing you can do. So, and this is the fault of public tender. So if all this was forbidden, that you need to pay a company, that you have to lot, so we will have another ecosystem. So this is why I won't blame the people for not being an expert on digital, but my institution have to be, they have passed already half a century, so I think they could have get to know a bit more about the sovereignty.
Well, thank you very much, Simona. I think we have to move on to our next session, but just one last round of applause for Simona. Thank you. Thank you. So our next session, I hope we're going to very much focus on these sort of pedagogies, practices, strategies, the things that are being done on the ground by educators that have kind of been enacting the critical change that we're sort of looking for and been talking about today. So this session, Future Narratives, showcases the practices from the Critical ChangeLab project from 3 different organizations that help young people critically reflect and on their present and also have that agency to alter their futures. So I might ask all of the presenters to come up and sit here, and then we'll have a short 10 minutes of spotlight presentations from each of them and time to discuss each of the different methods and strategies that they're using within the Critical ChangeLab and their organizations. So our first presenter is Johanna Lenhardt, who led the implementation here at us Electronica of the Critical ChangeLabs and who explores how narratives shape our perception of the past and future, and how cultural institutions can open new storytelling horizons. So Johanna, if you would like to join. Caitlin White from Trinity College in Dublin, whose work in civic education helps young people in Ireland engage with democracy through history, public storytelling, and future thinking. So thank you. Caitlin, please join us. And Patricia Del Razo from the University of Barcelona, a community-based artist and researcher whose work uses performance and storytelling to spark civic imagination and political participation. So I think Johanna will give the first presentation, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew, for the introduction. Yes, so we will go very much into practice and what we did with the Critical ChangeLab. I will today talk about 2 methods that we employed with young people to actually really think about the future and envision alternatives. The reason why we focused our Critical ChangeLabs on envisioning futures. Not working? Okay. No? Okay. The reason why we were focusing our Critical ChangeLabs on envisioning futures was that when we started the project, we were, of course, talking with a lot of young people about what they think about the future and how they think things will turn out, and basically just trying to get the perspective. And the answer we very often got was flying cars. You know, there were always flying cars in the future. And on the other hand, there was this notion that we don't know what will happen in the future. We can barely think past school. So there was this feeling of overwhelmment, of like just not having the space for really thinking about what the future could bring or what they would want to change in the future. So we focused our Critical ChangeLabs on this topic, envisioning futures. And there we quickly just like envisioning futures, just to like give them a space and also tools to actually properly think about what they would like to change. To facilitate this, we employed 2 methods that I will talk about, the Archive of Voices and the FemPlac, that I will come back to later. Just to give you a bit of context, we did this Critical ChangeLab with a group of students at the Viennese secondary school. So the students were about 16, 17 years old, and we met them for 6 sessions. So we met them over 2 months approximately. And these 2 methods we employed relatively at the beginning. So first session, we kind of met them, get to know them, and then we dived into this kind of exploration. In past CC labs, before we employed these methods, we often had the problem that when we were talking about the future, that students could very clearly pinpoint and say, okay, this specific problem is like important to us, for example, social equality or whatever there is. So they could very clearly pinpoint that, but often the problem was relating the social problem to their own experiences, so to their own position in society. So this was one of the challenges we faced and that we wanted to address with these methods. So it was really about identifying an issue and deconstructing the issue to go back to their own personal experiences. So this, the first method that we employed there was the archive of voices. Here on the, on the left side, you can see a little frustration mapping that we did before the archive of voices. So this is how we started out. The CC lab, basically asking the students, okay, what bothers you in your daily life? Anonymous, you know, you can write whatever, you can just type it in. That's what they came up with, and you can see it's very much focused on, you know, school life. You know, math is annoying to me, teachers are stressing me out. Also the social context was a big factor, like school life as a social environment, and so on, but very much focused on everyday school life. And we did that, and then we asked, in the next session, we asked them to take this out of the school and actually go to the streets and do interviews with passerbys. And basically, we asked them to do exactly the same as we did with them. So we put them into basically a researcher role and told them, okay, ask the people, what are your problems in everyday life? What do you think the future will bring? So just to get this second, or this like archive of voices, like this very many different perspectives on it. So here you can see the results of what the people said on the streets. They recorded the interviews and we compiled them into keywords and then just made word clouds basically out of it. As you can see, this is a much more broader perspective, of course, because it's of people on streets, about inflation, politics, the polarization of society, all kinds of issues. And then what we did in the next session was to compare actually the frustration mapping, so what bothers young people in daily life and what did they find out in their street interviews. And this discussion proved to be very, very fruitful because it was a great starting point to connect the personal and the society level. Also, it fostered a lot of awareness for other perspectives because, of course, suddenly you realize, okay, people on the streets are thinking about completely different issues than our concerns, which, of course, doesn't mean they're less valid, but it's just a different kind of mindset. It fostered awareness, but it also fostered a lot of empathy. And importantly, I think it also fostered immediately a kind of speculative thinking. So they were immediately, okay, why do those people think that way? Why do they think this is a problem for them? You know, what are their backgrounds? What are their contexts? So this was one of the very fruitful outcomes of this method. And at the same time, it proved to be very effective in also deepening their own reflection on their lives, you know, thinking about, okay, why is this stressing me out? Why is this a problem? Why is the school system a problem? Why do I have this or that issue in my life? Yes, and as I already said, we also engaged them kind of in a researcher position. So we gave them kind of the power to actually ask the questions and not only like in a school context where always the students are asked the questions. So we kind of turned it around a bit. So this was the first part we did, but as you can see also with the results of the survey, this is still kind of on a very broad society level topics. So what we needed to do there is to actually bring it back to the participants, to the students themselves, to their own experiences, and focus them also on a specific kind of topic. And there, the FemPlug came in. We based the method on an activist group that is called FemPlug. So this group is active all over Europe. Basically, it's a very loose group. It's not a very structured or organized group. And originally, they focused a lot on feminist topics, but they moved on and to other topics as well, and are like very much operating intersectionally. And what they do is very simple but very effective, I think. They just come up with slogans for whatever topic they think is important, and they write it on like sheets of paper and just plaster them all over the city. You know, you have a slogan, it's very easy. You just need a paper and a pen, and you just hang it somewhere publicly. Yeah, all kind of different slogans, as you can see. They can be very, straight to the point, like Antifaschismus ist notwendig, so anti-fascism is necessary, so, no frills. Or they could be also like, metaphorical or even playful. Everything is basically possible there. So we introduced this to the students, and we asked them to create their own slogans. When the leading question would be then, what would you like to change in your daily life? So this was coming basically from this society level, breaking it down again to their own lives, but without losing this societal context. And then we hung them also, of course, in a somewhat public space. We couldn't quite go into the city and hang them around, because I guess that would be littering. But we hung them in a break room, basically. So it's a kind of like in the school context, it is as public as it can go. Like a lot of students passed by there every day. And we hung them there for everybody to see. And we were very, very happy with the results there, because they really produced this connection between the society level and their personal experiences. So, for example, here with the My Choice, Their Choice, this was very much about the rights of genderqueer people from a very personal perspective, with some participants being members of that group. Also, the Gewalt prägt, Stille bleibt, so violence shapes, silence stays, was about domestic violence. Also from one member of the group had personal experience with domestic violence, so also from a very, very personal, it wasn't an abstract societal problem only, but really coming from their own experiences. So this was very, it really reconnected the personal perspective with the broader societal context. And also what we thought was very helpful was this activist context that we opened up with using the FemPlug method, because this led basically automatically to a kind of examination of power structures. Because the FemPlug, they were kind of perceived, and I mean they are, a kind of guerrilla group, really low-key, really going from the basis upwards. It's very easy to employ. And the students actually made the comment that, okay, everybody can do this, everybody can basically have an impact on how the future is shaped. Yes, so these are my two Praxis examples. We thought it was, just to wrap it up, it was very effective to actually not get the flying cars. There was, in this group, there was not a single flying car, which was very, which was it was a success. And connecting these societal and personal experiences together, we thought this was a very effective method. Yeah. Oh. So thank you.
Thank you, Johanna. So I'll now ask Caitlin to give a short presentation of her practice.
And thanks everybody for coming. I am going to follow up actually a little bit on what Johanna was talking about. and present to you a method that we've used with young people, again, to get them to imagine futures. I'm from Trinity College. We're one of the partners on the Critical ChangeLab project that you've heard throughout this conference slot. And one of the challenges that we faced when we were working with groups of young people was to get them to really engage in imagining the futures that they wanted. And we feel that this is really important for our project on strength and democracy, because we want them to see the futures that they want to work towards. And it's really important for them to see the futures in their local context. But one of the challenges that we were having was that we work with lots of different groups of young people. It's not the same group that we have all the time. And so sometimes going into a group of young people, speaking to them, trying to get them to imagine futures, it can be a little bit maybe daunting for them. They don't know us quite so well. So we use this method to kind of playfully and creatively get them to think about start to think about the kind of futures that they'd like to see. So a little bit about the young people that I'm going to talk to you about right now is that we worked with an all-girls secondary school in a suburb outside of Dublin. So they're aged about 15 or 16 years of age. The suburb itself the settlement, it is quite old, but in the last 40 years or so, the population has really exploded, and there's been a huge expansion and a huge new population living in the area. Traditionally, the area would be viewed as a disadvantaged area. There's higher than average rates of crime, there's violence, drug use, and so we wanted these young people to imagine positive futures for their area, to imagine the kinds of area that they wanted to see. And so to do this, this was the map that they did end up creating, but the activity that I'm going to talk about is what we call break it before you make it, which is an exercise in divergent thinking. If you've ever stood in front of a group of 15 or 16-year-olds and asked them, tell me what you want, you'll all be familiar with the silence that might face you. So we use this to scaffold them to reflect a bit more on the kind of futures that they'd like to see. These are just kind of some basic instructions that we give to the young people. We want them to work in groups. We want them to create this together. They should, like in a practical sense, they should have things like a large sheet of paper or markers and post-its, and you'll see examples of it in just a few minutes. And what we tell them is we want them to design the worst possible town for young people or teenagers that they can think of, or a place of unfairness, a place of unequal opportunities, a place that they really don't want to be. And again, there's different kind of levels of different interests, different abilities within the group, so they can be really, really creative with this and draw it physically. They can think about kind of policies they'd like to introduce and stick them on post-it notes on the piece of paper as well. It really is their own design. And we tell them that the target group here is young people, so they really have to think about the worst possible places for them. And so this is kind of some of the hints that we give to them. Sorry, that's a bit of a repeat. But we tell them to think of things that they're fed up with or frustrated with and to amplify them. And one very creative teacher suggested that we try to get them to think of, I don't know if you're familiar with the film Matilda, where Miss Trunchbull has this horrible school. So we get them to think about their school environment first and think about all the things that make that school really terrible and what they want to see in their terrible towns. As a result, they create these towns that they feel they're there. These towns that they feel would be the worst possible places for young people. These are some examples here. You can see that the town here, it featured some restrictions on freedoms, lack of accessible spaces, there was climate disasters. Restaurants and fast food spaces featured quite strongly, which at first I thought a bit surprising, but actually on reflection and conversations with the young people, these are some of the few public spaces that they can meet with their friends. And so they found them to be very, very important to them. This is another example of it here. But through the different groups, when we analysed these images and the towns that they created, we ended up identifying some of the relevant themes that we were seeing across all the groups. We presented these themes to the group, so we want to really make sure that with this method, it's very much created with the group and not for the group. We presented it to them. We asked them for their feedback. We asked them to reflect a bit on the themes that we had identified. We also gathered some of their responses on an online platform as well about things they did and didn't want to see. or things they would and wouldn't like in their future. And together with reflecting with them, with gathering this online and with looking at the towns that they created, we then worked on those themes and used those themes as the scaffolds for how we were going to look at the local area going forward. Similar to Johanna, we put the young people in positions, or to Electronica and Johanna, we put the young people in positions of researchers. They went out and analysed some of the challenges in their area, and then they started to imagine the futures of their area under these specific themes. And so what you see here, so we start to build out then on those visions of the future. So what you see here are some of the imaginings that they came up with, some of the imaginings that they created and put on that map that I showed you at the very beginning. And the method, we think, has been really useful as a way to break the barrier of imagining the future with youth in a really creative and playful way. And there's some direct correlation that we can see between the worst possible towns that they imagine and what they would like to see in their area in the future. You can see them really kind of build out from that and use that initial, almost icebreaker type method as a scaffold for what they'd like to see. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Caitlin's method? Okay, so now we have Patricia from the University of Barcelona.
Hi, thank you. Thank you so much for this space, for sharing the tools that we're using in the Critical ChangeLab in order to generate critical moments or slight like diversions of change. So we're from University of Barcelona, and we're here to present one of the multiple methods that we've been using, which is performative theater tools. So we're just very quickly, I'm going to take a few moments to remember what is the theater of the oppressed, which is a tool, one of the main tools that we've absorbed in our methods. And it's basically the reappropriation of Augusto Boal's technique, who was the Brazilian director and activist, who developed this type of technique in which you generate a participatory frame for actors to present a social conflict, and then you invite audience to participate and to generate a change within that given framework of conflict. And of course, just setting up a little bit of framework, he himself based on the critical pedagogies of Paulo Freire, which are set, as it has been mentioned before, on how we can, like before we even think about literacy or we can think about critically developing this ability to read written word, we need to read the world. So we need to we need to develop the ability to understand, identify, and challenge power structures and develop tools in order to modify those systems of enforcement of power. So Augusto Boal drank on that ideology and generated his own version applied to theater. So in University of Barcelona, we decided to take that and sort of mix it up a little bit and provide an example, which I will explain, two examples of different moments in which we use these techniques. And yeah, so before I begin with the presentation, I would like to recall a little bit of one of the questions that has been posed as a prompt to reflection in this symposium, which is how can we foster and educate and promote an activist, and I've gone ahead and added a bit more anti-colonialist, anti-racist, actually aware of the eco-social challenges that pose it in the current state. How can we do that in an intelligence creative way? So like in the first shot, it seems overwhelming, and I would go ahead and press the panic button and say, it's impossible, panic, yes, yes, yes. But if we just pace out a little bit and think that there isn't a single way to educating and promoting this, it's more of a process, it's more of a way of allowing multiple points of view to stand and to dissent and to be able to coexist. That may prove to be a possible possible way into fostering a really inclusive intelligence. So, out of the blue, I think that through empathetic, critically conscious, embodied, and situated methodologies that enable participants to interrogate dominant worldviews and destabilize entrenched power structures. So, yeah, but how? Okay, so by eliciting multimodal and intersectional perspectives and fostering diverse avenues of artistic expression that resonate with contemporary multicultural contexts. So, in that sense, we at the University of Barcelona maintain that theater video pressed in its multiple formats, which we only use 2, but there are plenty. You've got the invisible theater, you've got the newspaper theater, you've got the legislative theater, so there are multiple. We just use 2, and we sort of use them freestyle. So in that sense, it's a very rich methodology that till this day, it has become a sort of wiki resource in which every person in every group of people that performs this theater video press, image theater, forum theater in different countries have something they have added to the method. And it's a very permeable method that can very easily adapt to its own context. So it's continually evolving, and it has been reappropriated and reinterpreted across contexts. So I'm going to share with you two different cases in which we use theater video press, image theater, and forum theater. One is formal education, the other is non-formal, but it both worked quite effectively. So in one case, we were implementing a Critical ChangeLab in a library in Barcelona. And the topic was social indolence. So once again, as the previous methods have been chosen, have explained, we try to approach it from, let's say, like an affective, emotional, which is something that usually lacks when talking about changes, futures, democracy. We really need to root things in people's experience, embodied experience. So students there, they were 12 to 14 years old. They had previously prepared a diary in which they had to identify cases they had seen in every day about social indolence, and then they were brought there to the session, and they had to construct an image like a sculpture with the participants, and in that process they had to codify their understanding of what social indolence meant, and then the rest of the group had to decode it. So this is another, let's say, like interesting part of the methodology. You have a double process. You have the process of generating the image, the coding of the semantic coding, and then you got how people interpret it. Now it's very, very important that you strictly set to what are people understanding. So the conflict is what people read, not what you intended. And you intended to create something, but then people read it as they can, and that sparks like a multiple avenues of how you can enter multiple voices and multiple interpretations on a single situation, conflict, meaning social indolence. So another, say, like rich thing is that you've got no longer like a rational approach to to the conflict, but you got to embody it. You pass that observation through your body, or in this case, somebody else's body, but then you get to see it like in real life. So after we did this, they had to answer a couple of questions. What do those scenes tell us? What do they have in common? And from that, we generated like a mapping, as we've seen in other cases. And then the second case was, we actually sort of freestyle one of the Dublin's activities. So we sort of hacked it and made it our own. So for this second school, this is formal education, once again 15, 16 years old. And we previously have asked students to imagine their worst scenario in a socially unjust school. So we changed it to set it in what is the worst school that you can manage. And then try to imagine a conflict that happens within that school. And then you got to represent it. So, and the previous technique, you had to represent it within like a tableau vivant, like a still image. And then you change that image, or you give feedback to the image alone. But here you get a little bit of the interaction, the representation. So, for example, in this image, you get the black girl. She's representing the professor that doesn't allow students to leave, and that was also very rich, because the student was representing the teacher that was in there that performed those social injustices. So after you present that, then the whole group brainstorms ideas on how to change that solution. So in that way, envisioning alternatives becomes a collective activity. So those are the two examples, and to all participants, educators, and facilitators, thank you so much.
Just would like to ask if anyone from the audience has any questions about the methodologies, or more broadly, actually, the Critical ChangeLab project itself. So are there any audience questions? No. I would kind of like to sort of like loop back to kind of a topic that was sort of brought up in both the discussion panel and our first keynote, and also even in the sense we're talking about digital sovereignty, these issues of like agency and also ownership. Is this something that you felt in your experience like, running these Critical ChangeLabs? Are these often sort of topics or themes that young people are conscious of, or are they aware of when they don't have agency? Are they aware when they like have ownership on what they do and when they don't? Or are these sort of sometimes blind spots for a lot of young people that are working in school systems? Johanna, you want to start?
Okay, sorry. Yes, I think they're very much aware. They maybe cannot put it into these words. They don't have, they're not yet there to reflect this on a theoretical level or on a more abstract level, but they're very much aware where they are in a hierarchy, where they are in power structures. They absolutely know. I found it also very interesting that they also sometimes refuse to turn this on the head, because, of course, as you see, the CC Labs try to break these power structures up and to give them agency and so on. And we had this one group that we were working on like envisioning like the future of school life, basically, and where we were talking about conflicts in school, and we were trying to get them to like basically, well, police is maybe a harsh word, but police themselves and like regulate themselves and their school life. And the answer we got there was like, no, this is not our responsibility. You put us in this hierarchy, so this is the teacher's job. So yeah, they're absolutely aware, and they also like stop us when we're going too far and like trying to change it. Yeah.
Galen?
And just to add to what Johanna was saying, we found that as well, that we sense that they definitely are aware, and perhaps just, like you said, don't kind of vocalise or articulate it in that kind of theoretical way. And in one of our interviews with one of our educators, that's exactly what they came back and said. We asked them what did they think the impact of the labs were on the young people, and he said that they were things they already knew, but you gave them the language to describe it and to explore it and reflect on it. So I think that's been one of the real, really rewarding and meaningful moments of that particular lab was kind of hearing that and observing it ourselves in the room as well. But I definitely think, yeah, they're very much aware of where they stand within the hierarchies of education in particular.
Patricia, would you like to add something?
Yes, maybe I agree with my colleagues. Maybe the real challenge is how to get them to go outside their own individual sense of injustice and connect it to the whole systemic situation, to help them be aware of how this is not just happening to you, but this is also happening to your teacher, it's also happening to the whole education system, it's also happening to this country. So that change between the individual sense of impotence or of anger is the real challenge, is how to make it awareness, the systemic violence that exists.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions from the audience? Well, then I'll thank our practitioners for giving these presentations of their methods. So thank you very much. So we now come to the end of the day. So for just a general wrap-up, we've really moved across a lot of notions of this idea of panic, and also unraveling often these systems that we cannot see. And I think one of the key themes that's also very much come through on everything is the different forms of literacies that we need to be able to actually, for young people need to be able to be active and sort of have the capacity to create the futures that they want, the futures that we saw through them designing in these Praxis presentations as well. So I think this idea also, when we were talking about just towards the end there, when Patricia was bringing up, being able to see that their own anger and their own sort of like individual feelings are kind of connected to sort of a broader, like complex sort of like collective experience across society and with their peer groups as well. The way that everything is connected, this way to sort of empathize and to really sort of like see into how things shift. These are things that you don't just learn with standard sort of types of literacy or numeracy, but these are types of like things that you learn through empathetic thinking, through like critical literacies, through creative thinking, and also through future thinking styles as well. And I think very much these types of literacies are the types of literacies that we really need to emphasize a lot more in our education system to be able to kind of, you know, counter these black boxes, these power structures, these sort of very dominant systems that are shaping our world and make it very hard for us to kind of like find our own path through it. So I think, you know, we had this sort of keynote from Simona talking about how the tools that we use and the way that we kind of communicate with each other are like sort of closed and they're blocked and they're owned as well. And that this sort of way of decontextualizing ourselves and our students and our young people from the tools that they use is creating sort of this. I think Derek was like talking about. It's like we're creating this sort of like contextual mask that the machine is wearing sometimes instead of ourselves. We lose our own sort of ability to sort of enact the critical change that we need. So thank you very much for joining us today. And tomorrow we'll be following this a lot more, looking at how non-formal learning organizations are trying to create this critical change as well through sort of STEAM practices, critical making, and arts and culture. So thank you very much for joining us today.